firstly, lovely to meet you all.
Lovely to meet you.
I've been importing now for 16 years. And when I started, I knew absolutely nothing about importing. And it has been a huge learning curve. So if I can share some of the pitfalls and some of the shortcuts with you all, then hopefully your journey will be a bit easier than mine. The reason I started importing was because I set up Tiny Box Company back in at the end of 2007, and I knew nothing about packaging. My background was software, so a massive leap. And the reason that I did it was because I couldn't find any packaging in the UK that worked for the products that I was selling. So, and it wasn't possible at the time to make them in the UK. Sorry?
No, you can continue.
Yes, so I had to import. So the first thing that hit me hard was quality control, because the standards in the UK for the consumer are very different to other places around the world. And depending on where you import from, the standard differences are huge, and the most common pitfall is that the samples that you get look nothing like the final product. I see that so often with the businesses that I talk to. So it's really important with your terms when you're buying from a supplier that you have some kind of clawback, or some guarantee that if the products are substandard when they arrive, that you can force a remake or something like that. So what we do is that we because they'll very rarely give credit depending on again where you're shipping from, but what they will do is you can ask for a guarantee of any damaged products or products substandard to be remade. And what's really important when you're doing the remake or requesting the remake is that you overestimate what needs to be remade to cover your shipping costs, because otherwise you are paying for shipping twice. And it's very rare that you'll get a supplier to cover the shipping back to the UK. So that's one of the most important things. If you can afford it, it is well worth getting a quality control management company. I don't. I would prefer to deal with the factories directly, but a lot of people I know that import a lot from China and India do use a quality control agency, and then the emphasis is on them to make sure that the products are to standard. So assuming that you have your factory and assuming that you are happy with the quality, the next thing is the shipping. I don't know if any of you remember the Suez Canal disaster, where a boat got stuck in the Suez Canal. Well, we had stock on that boat and we had 2 containers. Now, what very few people realize is that you think that the shipping company is liable for anything that happens to your products in transit. Wrong. It's your responsibility to ensure your products in transit. And with the Suez Canal, we had 2 containers on that boat, and the shipping company were asking $50,000 per container to rescue the goods or release them. So it would have cost me $100,000, which in many cases was more than the value of the goods on the containers. But luckily I had separate shipping insurance. The shipping insurance costs me about 300 quid a year, and in that case saved me £99,700. It's one of the biggest common mistakes that people make. The other thing to bear in mind is shipping LCL. So for those of you that don't know what that means, it means rather than bringing your own container, you ship and you share a container with somebody else or with other parties. And the shipping agent will arrange the LCL for you. the problem with that is that it's a lot easier for products to get damaged because your products will be on pallets that will be knocked by other products. If it's fragile, often the cost of shipping LCL is as much as a container. So even if you're not filling the container, it's worth shipping with your own container. We've brought goods in from America and China LCL, and often they come in damaged. So again, you need to make sure that your insurance covers that. So getting goods into the UK, I don't know how many of you are familiar with commodity codes and how you can find out what they are. I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me a minute. So let me just find share screen. So on the UK government website, they have the commodity code lookup, duty and VAT rates. I was doing a project recently with I would say, a very seasoned businessman, and yet it hadn't occurred to him that the products that we were bringing into the UK, there was going to be a duty on top of what we were buying. And what we were buying was jewellery. So I'll just talk you through how to find out what you are looking for. So if, for example, we're looking for jewellery, we'll type this in here, and then it asks you whether it's jewellery gold, silver. Oh, I forgot the J. So ours was costume jewellery. So it comes up saying there's 4 commodities in this category. So we've got cufflinks and studs without parts of glass or handmade and other. So we're going to go for cufflinks and studs. So then down here, we can see what the duties are. So we can see that for most countries, bringing it in is a 4% duty. If we ship from Central America, for some reason, there is no duty. But it's always worth checking from exactly where you're bringing in, because it's not consistent. There'll be different rules for different territories. But say your product is duty free, you will still have to pay import VAT at 20% on any products that you bring in. Now, if you're VAT registered, you can then claim it back. But if you're not VAT registered, that needs to be put into your costs. And obviously that bumps up your product cost by 20%. So for my jewellery, I had to allow 24% import duty, 4% duty, and then 20% VAT. Now, depending on what agreement you have with the VAT man, means what or how the VAT rule is applied. So for us, we pay the shipping agent the VAT, and they pay it for us. And we use what's known as their deferment account. The reason we use their deferment account as opposed to having our own account to pay the VAT man is because the VAT man wants to take hold of some of your cash in case you can't pay the VAT when the VAT bill comes in. So say, for example, we import £2 or £3 million worth of stuff a year. They wanted to hold about £700,000 of our cash against any potential import duties. So for the sake of ease and to keep my cash flowing, I use our shipper's deferment account, and I pay a very small percentage for the privilege. I think it costs me about 3 or 4%, something like that, which I can earn more with my cash in a high interest account. So that is the main things for working out the VAT and the tariffs. So once you know where your product is coming from, you've got it shipped or on its way to you. The easiest way is to ask the shipping agent to work out the paperwork for you. As long as you give them the commodity codes, they'll then calculate the VAT. You've got quality control covered the other end. So it then comes onto UK legislation and product testing. Again, it's one of the biggest things that are overlooked by people, where they think they can just, if it's made in China, then it's fine to bring in the UK. That's not the case. The legislation changes massively from location to location.
I think your question is because when you came,
Sorry, you can continue, right?
Okay. So yeah, every single territory has their own compliance. For example, if you export to China, if you export makeup or beauty products, it has to be tested on animals, which is the reverse of some other states. So whatever you're importing, you have to make sure that the product is tested. So, for example, the products that we were bringing in recently had to be REACH certified, and you have to make sure that the packaging of the product shows that it has passed certification. There are testing companies in the UK that do it for a living. So for me to get a product tested, it can be like £200 or £300. But then once the product's tested, I'm then free to sell it onto the market. So yes, everything, you cannot assume anything is fine. And the other thing to bear in mind is when you're importing, if you're importing it with the packaging, you are then liable for any packaging disposal tax. And this is a bit of a minefield. You don't have to worry about it until you're importing more than a few tons of packaging. But once you are, you then have to register, and you have to effectively buy stamps to cover the cost of replenishing, of disposing of that packaging. That's a minefield, and if anyone's got any questions or would like more information on that, I can send it to you. But that is for, as I say, when you get to a much bigger scale. One of the other things that I fell down on when I started was fluctuation of currencies, because everything I buy is in dollars. And when I priced my products in the UK, so when you're selling the products, especially if you're selling to a large organization, they will expect you to honor a price for a particular period of time. So for example, some of my contracts will last a year, and we agree a price for that time, which means that if there's any fluctuations in currency, I've got to cover it in my sales price. When I started the business, there was $2 to the pound. As at today, it's $1.27. A huge difference. And if you've only got 10 or 15% margin on what you're selling, that could be your margin wiped out. So what I do now is I always ensure, so I'll set my cost price at 125. And if I'm over that, then great, we're quids in. But then I always, if it's a longer term contract, I always build in a margin to make sure that if the currencies fluctuate, I've got that buffer. What a lot of bigger companies do is they forward buy the dollar. So for example, you can contact foreign currency traders and say to them that you want to forward buy however many $100,000 or $1 million now for later in the year, and they guarantee you that exchange rate. So if you've got big contracts, it's well worth doing, because then you know exactly what the cost is. The downside being, of course, that you pay for the risk that the currency trader is taking on. But yes, it gives you that security. So that is a really brief summary, because obviously I don't know how much you will know and what you're particularly interested in. But if anybody wants to tell me what they would like to talk about more in the chat, then we can cover those areas in more depth.